Hey everybody, it's Sean Gibbons from the Communications Network. How are you doing? I am wearing my Nationals gear, so a Washington, D.C. native and longtime fan. It's been 86 years since the nation's capital hosted a baseball game, and we actually still haven't hosted one, but my friends down in Houston, we got one from you last night. With that, I will simply tease everybody or taunt folks with this gear for the rest of the hour, but you're not here to watch me, you're here about baseball. My guess is there's 380 some people who signed up for this webinar from around the globe, and expectation is that you're here because you were thinking about or in the process of, or maybe just now beginning to noodle on the idea of redesigning your organization's website. And that's what we're going to talk about over the next hour. We'll be joined in just a quick minute by Matthew Billingsley. Matthew is one of the co-founders of the firm Visceral. They focus on social sector organizations, foundations, and nonprofits, and do all kinds of extraordinary digital design work. So we're honored and grateful to have them with us. If you've been on a network webinar before, you just bear with me. I'm going to have to say this stuff to you again. If you haven't, here's a little bit of instruction about how this thing's going to work. So we aim for these to be not only Matthew and I talking at you, but really making sure there's a conversation occurring amongst us. So over the course of the hour, we will stop along the way for questions. And if you're wondering how might you ask us questions, well, that's pretty simple. Grab your finger or your cursor or your mouse, whatever it is, and go ahead and just hover over the screen down at the bottom there. And what you'll see is there's a little couple of things in here. There's something that says Q&A, won't surprise you. That's where you're going to put your questions. And then just adjacent to that, the chat box. And in the chat box, I've already put a message into everybody, I believe. It says, hey, everybody, who's with us today? So I'm going to take a quick minute. And if you would, go ahead into the chat box, add your name, your organization, and maybe where you're checking in from so we can see who's with us. And then along the way, while you're doing that, as you're adding your names into the chat, our colleague Yabby, hey Jenny, hey Andy, our colleague Yab Sarah Ferris, Yabby, is on Twitter right now, and you can be too if you want. She is going to be documenting, making notes of these proceedings, following along on the hashtag ComNetLive, that's ComNetLive. Hey Kirsten, hey Melinda, hey Alexander, Pat, who else is Sheen? How are you, my friend? Aaron, you guys are moving fast. Molly, oh boy, I'm Bailey, oh, Michelle, Andrew. Okay, you guys keep going. I'm not going to be able to keep up with you guys. You're way too fast for me. Suffice to say, we'll be sharing information in this chat box along the way. So if Matt makes reference to something or a resource, we'll be putting in URLs here so you can grab those for yourself. But also feel free to help one another out. Somebody has a question, you have the answer. Go ahead and put it right in there. We'll be stopping along the way, as I said earlier, and putting questions not in here, not in the chat box, but in the Q&A box, which is just over to the left there. So put your questions in there. And I guess the reason we're talking about website redesign is because for many of us, you know, we work in a building or we have some sort of office space. But fact is, most of the folks that we work with, most of the folks that we serve probably don't walk through our front doors. That's probably the exception rather than the rule. And so for most folks, our virtual building, our virtual storefront, as it were, is our web presence, which is still, you know, I guess we're 20 years into this enterprise now, but it's still something we're all trying to figure out. And no one, I think, has perfected this, which is why we're all constantly searching for how to do this work a little bit better. And it's constantly evolving. Every time we think we've solved for something, something else emerges or comes around. And so Matthew's going to help us think through over the next hour what it means to really be thoughtful and strategic as you're doing this work, because of course these are major investments and a massive reflection on who you are, what you're doing, and why it matters, and how to engage folks. So that's what we're after over the next hour. With that, last little note for you, because I know someone always asks, yes, we are recording this and it will be posted on the network's YouTube channel probably within a couple of days. So if you come late or have to jump off early, don't worry, we will have it available for you there. And of course, those notes I mentioned that Yabby is making are available on ComNetLive, the hashtag ComNetLive. You can grab it there. All right, everybody, I'm going to shut up for a quick minute. Matthew, you want to take us away? Thanks everybody for being with us.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, thank you also for everybody being on here today, this afternoon. I will dive right into it after Sean gave us that really good intro. So before we get into it, just a quick little bit about me. As Sean said, I am a co-founder and creative director of Visceral. I've been in that role since 2006 when we founded. 10 years later, we became a B Corp. So we're really proud about that. I'm also an HBCU grad. So for anybody who is also an HBCU grad or affiliated, you know, salute to you. You know, we're doing some good work out there. A quick fun fact about me, back in middle school, I got my first sort of entrepreneurial taste of things and was selling drawings of superheroes in middle school to my classmates. So, you know, my candy and bubblegum sort of addiction wasn't going to feed itself. So I had to kind of take matters in my own hands there. So always been doing art, always been creative, and it's kind of coalescing into what I'm doing now at Visceral, so I'm pretty happy about that. So a little bit about what we're doing today. As Sean said, this is about, organizing a plan and constructing a plan for building effective websites. So how we're going to unfold this is we're going to start off in a very process-oriented way. We're not really getting into a lot of the tactics and a lot of the implementation. You'll see we have a little bit of that toward the end, but we're really going really high level, focusing on the strategy and the discovery of this. So with that, we're going to start off with the definition. Where do I start? What are the first, second, and third steps to get going? Why a website is even important, if you have some questions about that as well. So that's a longer section. We'll pause a little bit for some questions after that. Part two, we'll get into a little bit of an assessment, asking the right questions. Now that you know questions to ask, some of that information, now we get into asking questions of yourself, your organization, your team, and any prospective partners that you may be engaging with. And then finally, part three is more about the implementation and keeping focused. Now that you have the information you need, how are you going to structure that project for success? And then we'll wind down and do a recap and have some time for more questions at the end of that. So if all that sounds good, we'll keep going here. And part one, where do I start? It's a question everybody should be asking. So let's get into it. So why redesign? So if you're at this stage, you should be asking yourself, why am I redesigning? You want to give people a reason to, and this is where you insert your reason. If it's to care, if it's to tell others, if it's to give people a reason to give to your organization, to your mission. Above all else, you want to give people a reason to visit and come back. We are building a website after all. You don't want to just have some stationary thing that kind of is just rusting on the side of the road. You want it to be effective and be evergreen and be organic and lively. We're all communication professionals. Your website's more than just a digital billboard, right? It's only a portion of your communications tool set, but in a lot of ways, it's incredibly important because you have total control over the outcome and the experience, right? You can create custom experiences for people unique to you from your website. A website's going to shape your narrative. There's a lot of different places you can go to, I won't really get into the whole shaping the narrative itself and some of the strategies that go into that. This is the place for it. And again, we're all storytellers on this webinar right here. So there's other resources you can go. I can share a couple with you, but you want to be sure that you make it personal through the stories you tell. Website is still going to serve as the best vessel for that message. Again, because you have full control over what goes into it. A properly done redesign of your website can help you reach your organizational goals and convey your mission much more effectively. But you're already on social media. Well, that's great. Be there, stay there, be where your audiences are, but understand a few things about social media. It can only provide snapshots of your work and your culture and not necessarily paint the full picture of what your organization is about. And understand that once you are on social media, you have to stay there and maintain it and cultivate it. Once you start, you can't stop. There's nothing more demoralizing than an organization that you respect or that you admire to go to their social media channels and they haven't posted in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, even in some cases. It just puts your organization and it's in a bad light. So be sure that if you're there, stay there. But use social media as a tool in communication efforts with your website. They should kind of work in tandem. If you post a resource or a publication on Twitter, have a link back to your website. It kind of reinforces those habits and kind of reinforces your mission, your information a lot better. So again, going back to why redesign, what type of house do you want, right? What type of website, what sort of edits and website sort of updates do you need to make, right? You want to make it sustainable and make it future-proof. Don't build for today only, for the now. It's very important to bake in flexibility to make changes or additions without a ton of effort from your staff. It's got to be sustainable. A good rule of thumb is to kind of assess and take inventory of your full site every 2 to 3 years or so. You can do it a little sooner than that if you need to, depending on how active and how prolific you are with updates and edits and what have you. But if you need to do just renovation, smaller scale, making considerable changes, but within the current framework of your site, You may want to consider that. Or if you want to do just a wholesale remodel and a full-scale teardown, which is a little larger, you really want to sit with your team and any stakeholders and really weigh the pros and cons of both and decide what's best for you before you kind of start. You may not need to do a full redesign. You may just need to do a couple of, update a couple of sections there on your website. So just understand that. So this is a big one, right? Time and budget. You want to understand how much of each of these you can allocate. And this is huge. You have to be super honest with if you have a board of directors or an advisory board or what have you, any prospective partners or vendors that you may be engaging with. You want to have them shape the best outcome within your resources. What do you have to share? Start with a number and kind of firm it up as you consult with various people close to you. I'm kind of putting this up at the front here. It just kind of depends on what's best for your organization to really, as far as the timing goes. If you want to consider this at the start of the project, so you have a good number to kind of share with other people, or if you just have an idea and you want to, kind of go through the process that will kind of unfold here and come back and put a firm number on it, whatever's best for you, do that. But just have a good, solid idea of the capacity of the time and the budget that you have for this. Understand what you can do comfortably in-house. That's going to affect, each of these variables for each of these rather. Do you have to outsource anything? Can you phase out over a longer duration? Just so these are some of the questions that you should be asking when you think about, time and budget before you kind of go down this path of doing a redesign. And all these are going to play a gigantic role in the process. So defining the needs. So one objective, several requirements. That's important. I'll kind of unfold what that means a bit. So there can be multiple requirements or approaches to one goal since your website needs to do multiple things. But it's really good to condense this into a singular, succinct objective first. Maybe no more than, one line ideally. If you can get this to 2 or 3, that's fine. But it should be all encompassing. Don't fall into any traps of thinking of the cool and awesome tactic first. Nail what you need the website to do first and make sure whatever you do serves the website's needs. One example of this just briefly is, if you're shifting to a new funding strategy or what have you, or if you plan to later on, your objective for the site could be written as, to introduce and establish our new funding programs and initiatives for XYZ group, whatever it may be. So that's just one example. So you're keeping it broad, and then like the requirements, the bullet points of how you get there, that can vary. That could branch off and be multiples, but you're really working toward one overall objective there. One more thing I'll add on this one too is, we've seen in the past at Visceral that, some agencies or some organizations, put like SEO or analytics based type numbers ahead of, as an actual sort of like measure of success. Be careful of that since, those things take time to really gel. You want to be careful of measuring, hard numbers as a measure of success. It's just going to take a little while to get there. So just want to, make sure everybody's aware of that if you're not already. Next, you want to assess your site honestly. Again, be honest with yourself. Take a look in the mirror. Take a look at all aspects of your website, internally, externally. Interact with your site across different devices, mobile and desktop, and get a sense of the experience, right? Is it smooth to use? Is it frustrating? Do pages take a long time to load? Is it easy for your internal staff to make changes? Take a look at all that stuff. One thing that one sort of, piece of advice I could offer is to create task scenarios for your team. For example, set up an account or whatever it is and have somebody on your team or small group donate money to your organization through the site. Maybe set up an account to, a means of which you can do it multiple times. Get a sense and take notes of, what they say. Like, are they getting sort of, confirmation messages? Are they worded correctly? Just take a look at all those things. Have them register for an event if you put on events, or, find a specific resource if you have published writing on your website. How long does it take them to find it? Just kind of think about some of those things and have them perform actual tasks to go through the website. Survey and assess peer sites. Take a look at the landscape, survey people in your field, other organizations in your field, and some websites that are not, get a really good overarching sense of kind of what's out there. Take a look at what trends you want to adopt or wholesale avoid in terms of, how the site is presented or how it works. Is there something cool that you could, add to the site that you hadn't seen before? How difficult would that be to pull off if you want to incorporate some of those features in there? But overall, take a look at what you react positively and negatively to. One other thing on that too is going back to assessing your site, kind of cross-linking with assessing other peer sites. Make sure that your story, your mission, your core values especially, are all sort of gelling on the site. Is that easy for people to digest and understand? That's a critical portion with the type of work that we all do. And something you should definitely be mindful of. So now we're going into shifting over a little bit into knowing your audiences. Prioritize who the website's for, and prioritize is underlined intentionally, as it's not just a matter of gathering and listing out who this audience segment is. You really want to, order them and put them in the right hierarchical sort of order. You have to prioritize who it's for, who your website's for, because it cannot be everything to everyone. It's just going to become drowned out noise, and no one's going to take any action of any sort on it. So decide who your primary target is first and tailor it to them. Then determine any secondary audiences. Bonus points if anything beyond your secondary audiences, if you have it segmented out to, a tertiary audience or anything below that. That's pretty rare, but the more segmentation, the more that you can do to tailor each of those different audience segments, the more effective your website's going to be. So understand where the opportunities are for your audience. So you need to decide what you want each of these audience members to get or achieve on the site. Again, is it downloading resources? You should really focus on, search and, your taxonomy and how you're labeling things on the website. Is it filling out email signups to kind of increase, your email acquisitions, your email signups, your email recipients rather? Are interactions overall easy for them to perform? Understand how the site should serve them and identify where you can make those improvements. And again, I can't underscore this enough. Are your core values being communicated effectively? Just think about all those when you're looking at who your audiences are and identifying them. And then finally, for audiences, expand your audience. Kind of goes back a few minutes ago when we were talking about future-proofing. Again, don't just design, don't just do it for the now, but take a look at any groups that you may not be speaking to currently. You may be adding to your service offerings or expanding what you offer, and you want this group to be aware of it. What's going to resonate with them? You have to determine how important this is and what's going to resonate best with them, right? Again, all about values. Make sure that's showing up in the messaging. And does it feel real? Do you have or thinking about a policy for diversity, equity, or inclusion? This is huge. If you're not considering that now, this is the prime time to be doing so. For those of us lucky enough to, attend ComNet a few weeks ago, I was one of them. You heard Travian Shoulders talk about this very thing. We talked about like asset framing as a keynote, as a closing keynote there. Always be mindful of who you're speaking to. It goes back to authenticity. If you're trying to, reach a new audience segment, it's going to feel real. It should feel real to you. It should feel real to them. It shouldn't just be lip service. You're going to see right through that. So now we're on to assembling your team. And I've got this gentleman up here. I'm sure most of you are familiar with him. Darren Walker, president of the Ford Foundation. And I have this picture up just as a reminder to know all the decision makers in the website design process. What's their level of involvement and do they need to improve anything? Darren Walker is somebody who's probably not going to be involved in a website redesign in all facets, but should he be? That's for you internally to determine with your larger team. Get their decision making, get all the decision makers on the same page early and get them on often, and then determine how often they need to be involved in that. Assess your full team, identify all their roles and their strengths. Assign leadership, but don't just assign leadership, also assign accountability. And more times than not, the person who's leading each facet of the website redesign is going to have accountability, but they also need to assign who's accountable for what. It just creates a much more cohesive process when people have responsibility and they know what their roles and their roles and their responsibilities are within the team, and communicate with them frequently about what you need from them and when. We'll get into some of that stuff a little bit later on when we get to the implementation part about the when of that. But just know that you should be thinking about that very early on in the process. And then locate resources you may not currently have in-house. Again, going back to assessing who the team is. If there's a portion that you're going to need help with, whatever it may be, if it's a specialization in design or development that you may have a developer access to a developer who may not have like a certain code set, understand what that is and go secure that resource if you don't have it in-house. And then realize your team's capacity. And by capacity, I mean time. What do they have? How does this factor in with the rest of their, daily operation of your organization and their task list? How much is this going to impede process and other things that need to happen? So will people in the leadership position have the capacity for the project from start to finish? If you have a copywriter on staff that needs help with certain aspects they aren't familiar with the organization, they haven't been there very long, they're not that familiar, understand what that is and try to plug that hole as early as you can. Think about any sort of organizational events that may be happening that could put the project on a hiatus for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. Try to sniff those out early and have a plan to work around them. And then again, going back to accountability and leadership, hold the people accountable to have the solutions to work around those. And now here we'll talk a little bit about team roles and how you can start to define the internal team for the website redesign. So on the left here we have this we have like a couple of sample roles here, and not every organization is made the same. Everyone's going to be a little bit different, but just in general, the project content strategist is going to be someone who facilitates the content, gathers the content, oversees any copywriting and materials, and is going to set the vision for its hierarchy. And when I say content, I don't mean just the copy and the text, I mean everything, the imagery, any sort of, ancillary materials that are going to go on for downloadables, all that stuff. This person ideally is going to be closest to the organization. Not necessarily has to be the case, but someone who's going to have the most internal knowledge of how the organization operates and what the mission is. This person is going to be ideal to be this project/content strategist. The project manager is someone who sets checkpoints, ensures the deliverables are met, and is really the sort of facilitator for communication among the team. And a copywriter can be on this team or on the partnering agency. Copywriters, not every organization, has like a strong copywriting capabilities in-house to write for the web. That in itself is like a unique thing there. And then going forward, if you do engage in a partnering agency or a contractor, this is most likely the three key roles that you're going to have within that team. Now, again, all organizations are a little bit different. If you are fortunate enough to have a UX designer and a development or developers in-house, you're a long way away. That's great. Most organizations are not going to have these people. So we'll talk a little bit about what these people do. The information architect is responsible for the site structure, all the hierarchy. The UX designer creates the site's aesthetics and is responsible for setting a consistent visual system. And I'm going to get a little snooty here for a second because it's kind of my background as a creative. A UX designer is different from a graphic designer. They share a lot of the same principles and a lot of the same duties and functions, but a UX designer is different in that they need to have like an eye for function and structure of a website. So definitely look at a UX designer or design team that can help you with this if you don't currently have resources to one. And finally, development, is going to build the site and is responsible for executing functions and accessibility and security of the website. So pretty straightforward and pretty cut and dry. Now, there's going to be some instances where there'll be some overlap. Full disclosure, Visceral, I was kind of say we have project management on our team. That there's going to be some overlap of some of these in some instances, but this is where we kind of go back to, the role definition that we talked about earlier, and understanding what each team's responsibility is. Some copywriters are going to be on the partnering agency side, potentially. And then the last thing I'll say on this too is, if you are considering using a partnering agency or contractors, please be choosy, please be selective. Ask a lot of questions about how long they've been in business. Take a look at their client list and ask for references. Take a look at any outside help, any outside resource that's going to help you contribute to the overall strategy. The most qualified ones are going to have the ability and the capacity to do that. They're going to help you navigate some of those decisions and help you create a plan if you're still unsure about how to go about that. Building websites is what they do. If you found a good one, they should be able to, they should be able to kind of sniff out a lot of those obstacles for you. So if that all makes sense, we'll take a brief pause here, about 23 minutes in, and, take on any questions or any concerns.
All right, we have a number of questions, but before we do, as we're picking your team, one little piece, I hope I don't sound like I'm scolding you all, but if and as you're looking to partner with firms and contractors, I imagine for many of you, certainly it's true for us at the network, one of your core values, one of your deep commitments is towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in the tech sector, I think Matt would be one of the first folks to say this, is representation matters a lot, and yet there's a lot of tech firms that tend to be dominated by folks who like me. So if you can make it your mission to try to open the aperture and ensure that you're looking for female-owned or firms that have strong representation of people of color, it's a really great thing to do in a place where our sector can particularly lead. It's not just about who can do the job for the cheapest amount of money, but who's really aligned with your values and understands who you are, what you're all about, and helps to actually advance some of your strategic objectives. Okay, so with that, let's get to some of the questions, and Matt, there are a number. We may not get to them all just now. Folks, it's also worth noting, you can vote for questions. So we're gonna pick the ones that got the most votes, and the one that got the most votes just now is from Melinda. She writes, our web design contractor just pitched website updates to me that involve adding cookies to our site so we can send targeted communications to people who use our website. I know this is very common for many industries, but is it standard for foundations and nonprofits? Matthew, what do you think about adding cookies to your site so you can track people?
It just kind of depends on what you're doing with the site. Like, why do you need to track people? Is it to, I think you have to determine the why in all this. I don't know if I can't really say if it's standard or not for, organizations to do so. But if you're, a lot of people who use those cookies are like selling products, or they're tracking what your buying or viewing habits are. I don't really have any true opinion on it, but I would just say, ask the why. What is the benefit gain from tracking a user who visits your site and then goes off? What are you looking for that? What information are you looking to gather from that tracking their movement on the site? I think you just have to answer the why.
Good point. And our colleague Ari Klickstein at the Rockefeller Fund says he does use, at Rockefeller, if I can spit this out, Rockefeller Brothers Fund does use cookies. And he says they use that as part of looking at their overall stats in Google Analytics to help think through content strategy and the site's architectures. They're also very curious about where users are coming from. So some of this may be just simply intel gathering. But Matthew, you're sort of agnostic on whether to use or not to use. There's no particular.
I think so. And you can also, I think Ari said that too, from, using Google Analytics can kind of get that as well. How people are coming into the site, their duration on the site, what are they accessing? And people can also turn off cookies, so it's not really, if you're trying to do that for data intel gathering, it's kind of, it's kind of inefficient. It's not the best way to do it. But if it's something that you really care about and you can justify the why, I don't see any problem with it. But Google Analytics is a great alternative to getting that data that you're looking for.
One other thing to maybe think about, Melinda, is if you're going to collect it, who's going to actually, it's kind of like buying a big house with a big lawn. Who's mowing the lawn, right? If you're going to add cookies to your website, whose responsibility is it to do all the analytics work and analysis? Because otherwise, you're just growing weeds. Molly asks a question. How would you approach rolling out website design changes for a rebrand, Matthew? Would you do that all at once, or do you think it's better to try to roll those out gradually?
For a rebrand, you said?
Yeah, so I guess the website would be part and parcel of a full rebrand, a new website design to accompany a rebrand. Would you do that all at once, or is there a piecemeal approach more common or more useful, more practical?
I would go piecemeal on that. I think it's, you really have to decide, like define the brand first, what are the attributes? What's the tone of voice? It starts with the brand redesign. It starts with the visual system because all that's going to influence is going to inform what you do on the website anyway. We've kind of seen that in the past where, we've seen like the rebrands kind of going, parallel with the website redesign. It can be done. It's a little more daunting than it probably needs to be. I would definitely suggest kind of, formulating, kind of establishing the brand, the new guidelines of the brand first, and then, apply that to how it's going to influence the creative aesthetics and the tone of voice and all that into the website. You should be thinking about those in the brand anyway, again, like who you're targeting, all that stuff. It's going to influence what you do on the website. So definitely start and establish the brand redesign first. Would be my suggestion, and then apply that later on to the website.
Yeah, and my little 2 cents on this would be the 80-20 rule is in full effect here. So you're going to spend a ton of time building or doing that rebrand work and including potentially building a new website. And then ultimately that 80-20 rule actually inverted. It's 20% of your time building it, right? And then 80% of your time communicating it out. So even if you were thinking about rolling it out all at once, there's a day one piece. Mm-hmm. But the truth is that your day one may be somebody else's day zero. They're just not paying attention. So you're going to be really intentional about thinking about rolling out that rebrand over a long extended period of time. It's the old rule, a little aphorism that was attributed to Ronald Reagan, which I don't know if this is true or not, if it was actually his words, but the minute you get sick of saying it is the first time that they hear it. And so whenever you're rolling something out, probably worth thinking about adding a tail to it that's a heck of a lot longer than you might otherwise think is necessary.
Absolutely.
Another couple questions and we'll jump back into it. So question that everybody's interested in hearing the answer to. You had talked, Matt, at the beginning about establishing one single objective for your website to really get disciplined, to lay out that strategic objective. And so the question is, can you give an example of a good single objective that a website can achieve? I'm assuming making you a perfect coffee every day is not one of those.
For sure. Yeah, the perfect one, that's difficult, right? Because again, every organization is different. So, one person's perfect is going to be somebody's complete, it's going to be ineffectual. But one thing to kind of take a look at is, define your purpose, kind of take a look at it like that, kind of understand what your purpose is and kind of build that objective around what that is. It's your purpose is a statement that kind of says what you do and who you do it for. You really want to summarize your approach. To kind of give an example, we want to, I'm going to kind of give just like a super generic off the top one, but we want to ensure better education for K through 12 students. That's super broad. That's just freestyle, but what exactly does that mean? That's like one place you can start. If you're in the education space, for example, you can start to define what better education means. Is it technological? Is it, technology access in the classroom? Are you segmenting a population or an underserved segment of that K through 12 population in a certain region? That would go into your objective. So you start kind of firming it up. Putting, technology in the hands of, K through 12 students in the inner city, whatever it may be. So kind of think about like that. So you kind of think about it, tie it back into what you're trying to do, and then make sure the website is, aligned to that purpose. And as far as perfect, again, everything's going to be a little bit different to each organization. So you really have to kind of have that conversation with your team and get on the same page and understand what that key objective is.
And is it fair to say when you're thinking about this, Matt, that sometimes one of the things you're thinking about is what is that call to action? What's the one thing that people are going to do over and over again on that site?
What's going to keep people engaged with your site? What's going to get them to come back? And why are they coming back? What's going to get them to share? Are you looking into, do you want to have people become advocates for you? The short answer is yes, most of us do. But what's going to be that thing to kind of convert a visitor to an advocate? That's something that only you can answer.
Okay, next question comes from our friend Teresa, and she asks, do you have any recommendations, do you have any resources or guidance when estimating a timeline and a budget for a website redesign or a renovation? We're not quite sure where to begin or how to come up with some realistic goals.
Sure. So I wonder if that's in terms of like general software and just like general practices.
So I think timeline and budget is really what she's after. And I know that can vary widely. You could build a Squarespace site for a couple $100, or you could potentially, and I'm quite sure this is probably true for like the Googles or the Coca-Colas of the world, spend millions of dollars on a website. But for folks in the foundation and nonprofit space, is there a general kind of, a couple of goalposts you can kind of live between? This ought to cost you this amount of money and it probably will take this amount of time. And like any home renovation, add 20% for both.
Sure. And there's no exact formula just for the things you just said, Sean, right? Like, depending on the need, everything's going to be different. And, that's sort of like the generic sort of cop-out answer is it just kind of depends. But it's true. It really does kind of depend. Like, one good way of kind of gathering that information is, ask others in your space, if they've done that before and kind of get a sense of, the range or what so-and-so charged you. It's gonna vary. It's not gonna be the most accurate if it was done a couple years ago. But you need to kind of get a sense of what exactly you need to do first. How much do you value the website? How much is it? It's kind of like, maybe this is more agency speak that, I probably shouldn't tip my hand here, but we're all friends. But, what's it worth to you? It really is something you have to kind of like answer, what's your capacity for engaging with this? How experienced, if you need to consult outside resources or outside help, what's their level of expertise? They're going to charge you, what's their time worth? I apologize if these sound like cop-out answers because there is no one formula. It just really depends on a lot of different factors. How long do you have? Like when you need it to go up. Time's going to factor into that a lot. If you have like a wholesale redesign that you need in front of a major event at the end of the year for your organization, and you're approaching somebody in October and they need the full thing done before Christmas. You have to consider that's going to probably cost you a little bit more than it would normally because that's going to be a considerable amount of time for you and any resource you have to pull in if you need to go outside in-house. Apologies if that's not really nailing the issue, but there are a lot of variables there. It's just going to depend on what exactly you need.
This is also a place where I get to do a shameless plug for the network's members community. So if you're on this webinar and you're a member of the communications network, you have access to the other 2,000 of us who make up the network, and you can ask that kind of question there, Teresa. And the thing that's always delightful and amazing is finding the dozens of people who turn up with an answer. And it may not be the perfect answer for you, but if you can compile a whole bunch of answers from your peers, sometimes that's a great way to start to see what the contours are that you're looking at and maybe even get some good advice on folks to work with and things to do and maybe even just as important things to avoid. All right, one more question, then we're going to dive back into this. Deanne, and forgive me if I'm not pronouncing your name properly, asks, how do you recommend ADA website compliance be approached? I think this is about accessibility. How do you think about ADA compliance when building a website?
Well, you want to take a look at what the guidelines are. They don't think they change too often. I could be way off in saying that, but there is a website. I can't recite it off the top of my head. My partner Jay would know immediately what that is. I can't remember what the website is, but Google the website. They have a list of guidelines. If you haven't already. But as far as like incorporating that into your website redesign, consult your designer, consult your developer on that. Make sure that they're aware of it. If they have little to no idea about what that exactly means, have them take that. And right on cue, Jay, webaim.org. Thank you, Jay. Webaim.org. Take a look at that. That's going to give you a good list of some solid guidelines there. And again, as far as like the execution of that, that's going to be a conversation to have with your designers and developers on this. They need to be aware. You need to be aware. If you have any sort of, if you're speaking to a visually impaired audience or any impairments of any sort, you're going to have to do some special things on your website you may not normally do to include that audience. High contrast, for example. Don't consider a lot of gratuitous graphics or, a lot of different colors that have like low contrast, that's going to affect legibility of copy if you have a visually impaired, segment of your audience viewing your site. They'll give you tips and, give you tips and considerations for that. Some of it's kind of common sense a little bit, don't make stuff easy to, hard to find, hard to read. But yeah, take a look at that webaim.org to kind of learn more about that. They're going to have a full suite of guidelines for you to follow.
And our colleague Edie has a great idea too, which is she says she met someone, a comment from the organization Respectability, spelled like it sounds. I think there's a .org at the end, and they may have some resources as well. The other thing is our colleague Bailey says, aside from technical resources, be sure to recruit or hire some accessibility testers who actually have some of the disabilities or challenges you're trying to address. That's a fantastic idea. And again, probably a best practice you should be thinking of. If you're going to make your website accessible, make sure it's not folks who don't have those challenges who are doing the testing for you.
And one more thing to that too, if any designers out there, any creators are on right now, if you use Sketch, we adopted that a couple years ago. We love it as a website design building software. They've got plugins that are designed just for accessibility. So take a look at some of those plugins you can use. You can do like, real-time tests as you go to see like how to kind of give you like a gauge of how accessible and how compliant your website design is. So yeah, definitely take a look at that as well. So there's definitely tools out there.
All right, let's get back into it. And I know Kirsten, Lauren, Renee, Ariane, there's lots of questions in here. I promise we will try to get into them at the back end. But right now, let's go into part 2 and then part 3, and then we'll come back for more questions.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, well, let's keep the party going. Let's start asking some questions. So know that we're still in discovery, but now we're asking more tactical questions. We're starting to get into a little bit more of, some more concrete questions here after we kind of gone through what we need to ask. Now we're figuring how to ask. So with that, simple, what does a successful website look like? Again, it's kind of what you want it to be. And it's designed to be very high level. It should be broad, for example, it could be, to clearly convey the values and purpose of our organization, right? It's a little bit different from the objective. It's not as directive as the overall objective. It's more of like an aspirational broad of what you want a successful website to look like. Think about what makes your organization unique from other ones. Is it the experience of your staff? You have like a renowned, leadership committee or whatever it may be that's done a lot of effective work in the past. Consider, adding a blog that really promotes thought leadership and that kind of like, promotes, their names across the site, for example. Is it focused on, or you focus on published writing, have a lot of good links and calls to action to those articles and resources on your site that link off to kind of validate that writing. A great question to ask, that we actually ask some prospective clients is, if it's a year from now and you're thrilled with the outcome, right? What will have happened to reach this conclusion? What's the 1 or 2 things that got you to just jump for joy with a successful website? Frame the question in that way and then kind of work backwards. Think about your strategies, have they changed in the next 5 years, or could they? Again, going back to, future-proofing, your website's a living thing. As your organization pivots and adjusts to new sites, to new approaches, so should your website. If your website's copy and messaging is not aligned with your other communication channels, be it offline or, whatever it may be, if you're going to a lot of events and speaking engagements, what are you saying? Is it reflected on the website? You want to make sure that stuff is aligned. And if it's not, think about how you can get it there, and whatever the strategy may be. And then finally, map out considerations for accessibility, security, and functionality. So a good tip here, it's almost not even a tip, it's almost a requirement. Keep a technical development lead involved early at all times. Are you using any third-party vendor plugins or platforms? Have a plan for the integration of those into the site, or if you need to sunset them or archive them, have a plan for that as well, and have something that can replace it. You should have a technical, someone in the technical realm, a developer, helping you walk through this. It shouldn't just all be you, because there's going to be a lot of technical and development considerations to think through from a tactical level. So, this create project requirements, I'm just showing you 3. just really top line, this is where you really get down into the meat and potatoes of what you want the website to do. You know, these are just the three sort of top line. You know, I'm more than happy to kind of divulge some more questions you can think about, you know, later on if need be. But these are just some of the more overarching questions as it goes, as far as like requirements into the website. So seeing your audience, you know, what are the best engagement opportunities for them? So we talked earlier about, you know, who the audiences are, the audience segments are. Now that you've identified that, what do you need them to do, right? And again, I'm going to just throw out some very broad examples here. You know, for downloading resources, again, you want to figure out, you know, you want to have, you know, if you offer resources, you want to make sure those are clearly defined, clearly labeled, easy to find. Are there interactions on your site that are easy to perform? You know, get feedback from these people if you can. Just understand how the site should serve them, identify where you can make the improvements. And we'll get into a little bit more of that a little bit later on. But you need to understand like what you want them to do now that you know who they are. And then understand who are you not speaking to. So again, we talked about this a little bit earlier too, you know, about expanding your network and who you need to kind of bring in. You know, determine how important this is, how much time you want to allocate to, you know, to reaching an audience you're not reaching currently. Again, you can speak to everyone, but not everyone's going to care, right? You know, if it's, you know, a certain population of, you know, audience segments out there, understand, you know the capacity and how much effort you should, you know, devote to speaking to them. If it's not going to give you any sort of return that's effective, then don't bother, or think about a different strategy later on, or come back to it. But the smaller the vacuum, your audience vacuum is, the better off you'll be. You know, you want to target the most, you know, you want to target the people who are going to be the most effective to advance your mission and to advocate for you. So now we're back to more of the team building aspects of this, and you want to rally the troops, right? You kind of got your information on what the website should do, what needs to be on it. You know who you're talking to. Now you want to get the team to understand this. So the website team and any internal higher ups need to know exactly what the plan is. Make sure that everybody involved with the redesign understands what the goals are, right? You want to figure out how to selectively consider input from larger organizational colleagues. Again, going back to the example of understanding who the decision makers are. Know when and where they need to input their feedback, if they do need to input feedback, and understand how often, and more so than that, understand how you're going to integrate that feedback in. You know, you don't just have like an open, you know, sieve of just like dialogue of like, you know, leadership team or administrative team or whoever it is, just funneling feedback into. You have to figure out how to disseminate that and make it effective for what needs to go onto the website. You know, if you have a partner agency or contractors, are they aware of the plan? You know, hopefully they helped you define the plan, so they definitely should be aware of it, and just consider their input into shaping all of this as well. So this is a little more forward thinking, a little more, you know, fast forwarding, but make a plan for ongoing maintenance. You know, don't go through, you know, I highly advise to not go through this process and not have some semblance of a plan or, you know, some sort of order for how you're going to maintain it post-launch. If you have this whiz-bang proprietary CMS that you've never used before, well, who's going to be responsible for making the updates for it? Think about what that means now, this early in the process and discovery stage, and figure out who's going to do that. You know, how often are you going to publish blogs? Who's going to be responsible for writing, editing, and publishing to the site if you have a blog? You know, who's going to make the routine updates? You know, I'd love to hear if anybody's gone through this in the past, you know, how you've accounted for this. You know, I'd love to hear some of your, you know, some horror stories. It may help me, it may help others on this call as well. And then note challenges and assign someone to solve them. Whether it's administrative, technical, the sooner you can pinpoint the challenges, the better. And we'll talk about this just for a little bit here. So here's an example of a couple of challenges some of you may have gone through, may be considering going through. List out some of these barriers and roadblocks as they may come up. So for example, your funding grant may not be renewed next year. How likely is this to happen? You know, on a scale from 1 to 5, 1, not very likely, but it could happen. Have a plan for it. If there's an opinionated director focused only on the look and feel of the design, who has a lot of opinions on color and whatever may be in the brand, if this is the case, label this pretty high and figure out how important it is. Again, prioritizing the list of what you need to accomplish. And then some examples for that. So, one solution to the funding grant not being renewed, include a clause within the contract that specifies options when clients need to break the agreement. Assign this to the project manager. So you're defining the solution and you're tasking someone to oversee it. Going back to the opinionated stakeholder or the director who was very concerned about, the colors on the website and how it looks and operates. Share 2 design options with that person or the team as a whole. This is something that the designer needs to be aware of and account for. It might take a little bit more time to account for 2 options, but that's something that he or she needs to be responsible for. So just kind of think about some of those challenges that come up early and how you can navigate solutions for those. So keeping focused, kind of moving along here. So now you got to kind of execute and follow through on all that information we just talked about, right? So now this is where you start to determine if this project is going to take 6 weeks or 6 months and how you can track it and keep the full team engaged and focused on all points. So checkpoints and deliverables, these are incredibly important to set up. Some of you all on this webinar now may be doing that. That's great for your internal operations. It should also apply to the website project as well. We use Smartsheet. We love the Gantt view. It breaks it down by phases and it breaks down by phases, and we can review it at a very high level across the project very easily. Know that when you're creating your project schedule and you're kind of getting all the team involved, understand that if a change occurs early on, it's going to affect and just domino through the entire project. And then here's a quick example of a project calendar, and this is through Smartsheet. One thing I will say, Smartsheet, there is a cost to it. This isn't an ad, we're not getting paid for getting any signups, but it is a very powerful tool that if you're not considering it, definitely take a look at it. Check out smartsheet.com for pricing and all the goodies that they have for what's available. We've been using it for a while. It's very, very thorough, very deep. This kind of gives you a sense of, the people assigned to certain roles and the dates. You can see the Gantt view for the duration over the month. So it's very effective. It's very robust. You may not need something quite this deep, but we like it because we can see everything from a very high level.
It's probably worth noting here, Matt, real quickly on that last slide. Several folks have been asking, how long do these things take? And obviously, we know it's an accordion. It can be as small or as big as you want or need it to be, and depends on the scope of the project. But right here, you got something starting in February, and you're just at the end of the design mockup phase in June, which, if I'm doing my math properly, is 5 months. So you can invest quite a lot of time, potentially, website redesign. And obviously, maybe a quick question before we jump forward, what's the value of taking more time?
The value of taking more time is, and again, maybe a little bit of a horn tooting on my side now. Every agency kind of works a little bit different. I've been in scenarios where, I won't get into all that, but kind of how we do it now is we spend a lot of time up front in information gathering. We kind of do a lot of our sort of fact finding and iteration in the discovery phase of all of our projects before we even get to our information architecture or design. So the value is, we can still bake in all that exploration and all that iteration into the design as well. And what's really kind of really covered up in this that we're not really unfolding here is that we also bake in review periods. We also, in that full timeline, that long timeline for design, we have various reviews in there. We have time for our client to take a look at the designs and give, thoughtful, actionable feedback. Sometimes that just takes a lot more. If it's a larger site, we need to do more mock-ups. It just kind of depends. If it's a smaller site, we may do less screens. So it's just good to kind of bake in that extra time so we can be very thoughtful about the decisions we're putting into the design.
Fair enough. Okay, sorry to slow us down.
No, not at all, not at all. So meeting management. So, a lot of this, please don't glaze over if, a lot of you all are, organizers, agenda setters, what have you. hopefully this will be still kind of effective here for you, but understand that meetings should be designated to high-level thinking and checkpoint reviews only. It's a place to voice concern and discuss solutions. You want to determine the communication flow leading up to these meetings, and only meet when needed. How often does your team communicate now? Build that into how your communication flow is going to be set. Are people using email to kind of speak directly to one another on a daily basis? Only meet when absolutely necessary. And then who's in and how often? Again, going back to capacity, is this where board members need to be made aware of the process? Or the progress rather, excuse me. Does the PM, the project manager, need to be involved with these nuanced technical reviews? Down later in the side, later in the process when you get into development, just be mindful of everybody's time, and know that certain parts of the project may be heavier than others. Some meetings may drop off. Don't just hold a weekly meeting to just kind of gather and not have anything to come productive out of it. And then this is a big one. Create an agenda for each and every meeting, right? Nothing kills morale and drive more than aimless meetings. We've all been in them. Keep a top line agenda and assign people to drive at various times. Even if it's for 15 minutes, if you need to get really super technical, you can really define, you can really build out an agenda, to the exact minute. That's highly, that's really anal. If you're into that, that's fine. If you have to do that, but just kind of set a clear agenda and some top line bullets is pretty much all you need to kind of keep the meeting flowing pretty well. One thing I will suggest, a book that we've all read on our team, and we've kind of, adjusted our operation meetings to this, is a book called Traction by Gino Wickman, and he talks about the EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. I recommend that book. Take a look at it. It kind of sets, it's sort of like sets you a good foundation for meeting setting and agenda setting. So just one recommendation there to kind of take a look at that. And then some other tools. So Slack and Google Drive for team collaboration, document sharing, for scheduling, Calendly, or Google Calendar, SurveyMonkey or Google Forms for surveys and info collection. One thing I'll say on each of these is, again, if you're using outside resources or contracting agency or what have you, understand what software they're using, and figure out a way to kind of work collaboratively. One thing I'll say about all these I'm showing here on the screen, these are all free and they're all cloud-based. So you got two really good benefits going for you. Slack and Google Drive are good for document sharing. We use it internally here daily. Email still effective if you have to. We found that Slack is very good for that. Just make sure that you want to work collaboratively. I understand that Sean let me know that a lot of people in this sector are still in Microsoft suite of products. That's great. That's fine. Stay there, but figure out a way that if you need to consult anybody within the team who may not have it, you want to figure out a way to kind of make sure that you're working interconnectedly and as smoothly as possible. And these free software pieces here can help do that. So as we wind down here, a few tips and considerations. Number one, going back to just the overall website view, the website redesign and websites in general. Don't make me think. Focus on the places you want people to go and guide them there. People want a familiar but a unique experience, but one that doesn't vary. You don't want to have people guessing every time they come to your site and, where was that thing? Where was that page I was looking for that had the so-and-so? And, Google's good for that, for finding that, but you don't want people to kind of result to Google. They should be able to effectively navigate in and out of your website, just based on, how you have it built. So don't make people think. Have clear calls to action. Use clean and consistent design and labeling across the site to build good user habits and set that familiarity again, right? The website's a tool, right? A hammer is a hammer, a drill is a drill. Understand what each of those calls to action should do and drive people there. It's a wayfinding system. Again, it kind of it dovetails directly back into don't make me think. And then finally, track and measure routinely. Again, this is more of a post-launch sort of mechanism there. You can't improve what you don't measure. We talked earlier about Google Analytics. Use data to improve the site. Don't just have it there launch and just kind of have it sit there, just kind of collecting dust. You want to, it's a valuable asset in your tool set, again, for your communications efforts. Check on it, see who's coming, see how often, understand what, if you have an opportunity to, add a form, whatever, to gather feedback, check that, see what people are thinking, ask people when you go out in public and, at events, what have you. See how they interact with it. Just do all those different things as much as possible to track and see how good the website's performing for you. So as we wind down some more here, we got some key takeaways, just as a quick reminder. So going back to define, you want to know the role of the website. Again, what do you need to do on it? What does it need to do to perform better for you as an organization? Do you need to redo all of it or just a portion? That's going to be huge. Again, going back to budget and time, what you have to spend and the capacity for. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Understand what you need from the website and know who your website's for and assemble the team to complete effectively. Assess. You want to list out all the project needs. Prioritize your audience and tailor it for them. And then share and agree to the plan first before you do anything. Before you say anything to any pixel to screen, be sure that everybody understands what the game plan is. And then finally, you're going to implement. So make the project calendar, keep meetings focused. There's going to be a lot of that leading up into, all the planning and the discovery session, the discovery of it, and then go forth and build beautiful websites, and then go back and track as often as possible. This again is all very high levels, all very discovery focused. You have not put any sort of design or color or any, swath of paint to screen on the website yet. We're still firmly in figuring out how to take the necessary steps to go build a more effective website. And we'll pause here for any more questions.
Okay, we have a number of them. We also know we're getting to the top of the hour, so for folks who have to jump off, we're going to take as many of these as we can. And of course, I presume Matt and Jay and the team at Visceral will be happy to take questions. If you want to reach them through Twitter, and we'll be sharing that information. Maybe, Matt, just go forward with the contact real quick for folks who have to bounce so they know how they can get to you directly.
Awesome.
And hold that up there for just a quick second, at This Is Visceral, or Matthew at thisisvisceral.com. All right, why don't we bounce back? And let's go ahead, and Erin's got a question. She asks, we have a ton of content given that we are a community foundation, and our current website informs donors, advisors, grantees, and the general public. So a lot of different audiences. How would you approach purging content, or question, is that necessary? It often feels as though our website is like going down a rabbit hole. Thoughts, suggestions, reactions. So maybe one way to think about this, Matthew, is I've had a couple of folks say to me that a website is a digital bulletin board. And whenever I think of that, I cringe because I think of the website or the bulletin board at my kids' elementary school, which is like the best place to go to get no information whatsoever. Right? I mean, I promise you, I go in there frequently trying to answer a particular question about when's the next PTA meeting, whatever it is. Can't find it. Things are stapled on top of each other. There's no organization. It's a hot mess. Frankly, a lot of websites look like that too. So how can you help, Erin?
Yes, please purge. Yes, please purge. We kind of have this sort of unwritten policy when we're engaging in a new project where, one of the questions we'll ask is, first we'll kind of take inventory of the site, all their content, and we'll ask them like, how important is content from, that goes beyond 3 years? How important is that? It can't all be important. It's 3, 4, 5 years later. You really have to be really diligent in taking a look and assessing at how relevant that content still is. If it is, that's fine. Still keep it, but you want to have a really smart and really thoughtful, thorough sort of system for archiving that. Does it need to be sunsetted onto a different place on the site? If you have to go super extreme, could it be like, a place where you just have like an archive on the site? That doesn't happen too often, but it is necessary at times. But please purge, absolutely. I mean, that goes back to like the content strategist role and the copywriter's role, more so the project lead, the content strategist, to kind of help determine what exactly is relevant. Because like Sean was just saying about the bulletin board, there's nothing more frustrating than just wading through all this sort of redundant copy or these resources or pages. that just sort of like that are so parallel to other things, and it's kind of hard to really discern what's what. Yeah, it's in your best interest to go through that purge, and you want to do that again maybe every 2 to 3 years or so to see what's still relevant. Sunset that stuff if nobody's still using it. You know, if it has like if it's gotten like very few visitors or very few hits, if it's not really effective, if you're not maintaining a certain page or a section, there's no harm in doing away with it. But keep it back up. You know, that's, you don't have to completely delete it, but you know, keep it somewhere you can access it later if it becomes relevant again, and put it back onto the site. But it's definitely in your best interest to purge often and get rid of all that unnecessary content.
Okay, a question from our friend Kirsten. She asks, Matthew, when you say your team, what are you envisioning in terms of size and skills? And she just, full disclosure, she's asking for a comms department of 3 people.
Sure. So you want to take a look at the roles we talked about earlier, and you know, it really comes down to you know, the roles of what each person, what you need the website to do, right? You have to have the content, you have to have design, you have to have development, you have to have somebody kind of speak to all 3 of those. So you're kind of looking at, you know, 4 to 5 different roles right there. The one thing I didn't say about that earlier is that, you know, it's fine that if some of those roles kind of overlap, right? You know, full disclosure, you know, we at Visceral, we kind of wear multiple hats, right? You know, I will, you know, often do the information architecture on our websites and design it. You know, a developer is going to be very involved and also do some information architecture as well. You know, in some instances, our project management team will contribute to writing. So it's not so much the actual people, but it's what the roles are. You want to really take a look at the face of the website, and if somebody's there to kind of oversee and staff each of those key components.
Okay, next question comes from Anonymous. I believe you're writing a book right now, from what I understand. Sorry, bad New York Times joke. Can you show us an example? Maybe we can't show, but maybe you could offer an example, Matthew, without playing favorites, of a website that's doing it the right way. So what are some of the exemplars of folks in the foundation and nonprofit space who, just off the top of your head, you've been to their site recently and thought, wow, that is really well made, whether it's a site you built or whether it's a site maybe a colleague or competitor built somewhere along the way, something that you really looked at and admired, or maybe a couple of examples out there.
Absolutely. So I'll start off with the honest answer, and I'll give something that we have not designed. So I like the Chan Zuckerberg site a lot. That's a good one. Let me see if I can pull up the URL real quick here, not to show it, but just so I can see it. That's a good one. I really, chanzuckerberg.com. I think that's a good one. That's a good example of really clean design. It's a good use of the architecture and the structure for it. I'm a big fan of that site. I consult it often. Vera.org is another one. They're in the, you know, that's another good one that, you know, I kind of reference a lot. You know, again, not for only for design, but for content and structure. The information architecture is really good. What they're saying is great. It's just really what those 2 in particular are really well done. And, you know, I'm going to, you know, toot my team's horn pretty heavily here. A site that we recently launched, parkerici.org, the Parker Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy. I'm very proud of that site. It's one that my team worked on. We just launched it a few weeks ago. Take a look at that. You know, that's got all the, you know, that kind of nails all the portions of it. Shameless plug there, but definitely take a look at that site as well when you can. Those are 3 sites that off the top of my mind kind of exemplify like just good design practices, strong writing, strong architecture, just all the bits there are in those 3 sites in particular.
And then full disclosure for everybody, Chan Zuckerberg and the Vera Institute of Justice, which I think is what you're referring to with Vera.org, that's Mary Crowley, they're network members. So if you were a communications network member, the best email you could send somebody is, hi, I'm a communications network member, and guess what? Your email is going to get answered. Of course, you can also use the members community, but folks at Chan Zuckerberg and Vera are longtime members of the network. And so, of course, they exist to, at some point, they're going to need to borrow a cup of sugar from you. So if you have a question, feel free to reach out. That's what we're all about. Okay, next question comes to another anonymous question. How do you recommend disengaging from your current web provider if you're using a new firm? This is the breakup question. Are there standard processes or steps to take to safeguard your data or current site?
Wow, that's a heavy one. That's a great question. You know, I think I'm not sure how to answer that, honestly. I think, hopefully, if, I don't want to presume anything, but hopefully you have, or have some strong, or at least some contractual language in there, baked in to have like a good dissolution plan for that if you need to move on. If you don't, it could be a little heady. It could be kind of nerve wracking, kind of go on that path. I feel like if you have any sort of, the best advice I could give there, again, I don't know, I can't remember ever being in that situation, but I can understand that could be pretty concerning. You may want to consult a lawyer to see about that, like only if you're afraid of, some really confidential information getting out or them doing something malicious with it. But before you go there, before you go to that step, just ask them, have a conversation, have a conversation with them. You don't want to, depending on, yeah, that's a tough one, man. That's a really tough one. I wish I could give a solid explanation there. Outside of just having conversation and letting them know that it may not be working out. We want to go in this direction, and just be sure that you can secure that confidential information before you do so.
Yeah, I always feel like it's a little bit like buying a new house. Chances are you're going to need to change the locks.
Sure.
And hopefully you've had a good working relationship, and maybe there was an NDA or something of that nature. I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV, but that's something you should probably bake into every contract or engagements you're doing with external partners. Just a good practice to be in. Andrea asks, we've been trying to work on not having our website be so stagnant. So Matt, what are some multimedia features that you can recommend? And how do you find that balance so it doesn't feel too gimmicky or overwhelming or maybe just too busy?
Sure. So I think it really starts in two places, right? Early on in the process, again, kind of defining what those requirements are. And then later on with, post-launch updates, don't feel like, know that you can pivot and do updates and improvements to the website after you launch, 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever it may be. Never feel like you're stuck in something that you cannot change because you always can. But to avoid that, kind of going back, backtracking later on, if you're not happy with something, kind of goes back to the importance of what those requirements are. We talked about early on about like a few sort of top level, questions to ask in regards to like, the technical development, who the audience is, who it's directed to. You really want to kind of get into, thinking about the flexibility of your website way, down the road. There's things you can do to, build a site to be modular to where you can add things pretty effectively to it. If you add pages effectively, like it's, how it's built matters to that. What platform it's built on matters. If you're on WordPress, or Drupal or Craft or something, take a look at how much training you need to do to get, to effectively manage each of those platforms. How easy is it for you to add to it? You can build in a lot of that flexibility to your navigation structure. Like don't do something that, don't build something that's so, over the top and gratuitous and whiz bang and has all these bells and whistles that it's going to be just a beast to update later on. Because know that you're most likely going to be the one making those updates. So you want to be sure that you understand how it's built and know that, kind of get a sense of how, difficult or how, what the level of effort is for making those updates later on. So you really do that in the architecture phase, information architecture phase, and beyond that and before that in the discovery phase by asking the right questions to see how often do I need to update this website post-launch, and know that you can always change.
Okay, next question comes from Alyssa. She asks, any major disadvantages to outsourcing the copywriting for your website? We'll likely have to do that because we just don't have in-house capacity. So likely the designer we hire will also have to give us a copywriter as part of the contract. Is that very common? Do you all do a lot of the copywriting at Visceral or partner with a writer who does that for the clients?
We do. We partner with outside contractors to help us out for copywriting when we need to. Again, we know our strengths and weaknesses. We can all, everyone on the team is a writer in some capacity, but it takes a special skill set to really write effectively for the web. And we know that it's just something that we just generally do not have capacity for. Nor do we consider ourselves subject matters in the area that our client's work is in. we become knowledgeable as we go along with the process and understand what their mission is, what their organization, what their purpose is. But we would not presume ever be the subject matter expert. So we consult outside contractors when we need to. Generally, but what we do for copywriting, we will set up content strategy, and we'll kind of provide that, the form of templates for content that are optimized to be web ready, optimized to go onto the web. And we've been told that's very effective. It's a very useful tool for our clients who also struggle with copywriting sometimes. But as far as locating a copywriter, take a look at, again, assess what other people have done, see if they have a recommendation. Be sure that if you are securing a copywriter, again, they don't have to be subject matter experts, but if you're a foundation, you would love to ideally have somebody who has written and knows that space pretty effectively, pretty fluently. Tag those people and get it. And, you don't want to just get a writer for the sake of getting a writer, but someone who can speak effectively to what you do. I guess that's kind of goes without saying, but, be selective, be choosy when you're selecting copywriter. But yeah.
Sorry, I'm diving through these. Let's see, a couple more, and then we'll let you go, Matt. I know you've been very generous with your time. Ariane asks, what are your thoughts on different CMSs? So she says, we are currently on Craft, which is an open source CMS, but need to upgrade to the next version, and we're embarking on a website redesign. Is it time to move on from Craft, or should we look at other CMSs? Any thoughts there?
Sure. So, full disclosure, we are nearly an exclusive WordPress shop ourselves. It's so powerful. It's very user friendly. It's very modular. It's very easy to update. Very easy to maintain. We've dabbled a little bit in Craft and kind of kicked the tires on a little bit. It's kind of WordPress parallel. It's not a lot like it. There's a lot of similarities. Some organizations who are on it and they love it. We're not so definitive with WordPress that we would not, tell people they have to move to WordPress. But, we overwhelmingly prefer that over as our CMS, our preferred CMS to build on. It's just so easy to use. It's got a huge market share. Again, I could probably, bring Jay back in and kind of, spout off a lot of, facts and figures. That's his baby, is WordPress. We've adopted it. We love it. Definitely take a look at that. But everybody's needs are a little bit different. Some organizations are on Drupal. If that works for you, still use it. There's no reason why you shouldn't. Take a look at your team, who's making the updates to the website. If there's is it something that they can use very easily and effectively? If it's doing what you need it to do, stay there. If you need it to do something, if you need it to do more than what your CMS is currently providing, and looking around, I would strongly recommend WordPress.
Okay. One thing, and Tristan's looking this up right now, worth noting for everybody, if you weren't going to do a website, you're just kind of curious, and your site is built on an Adobe platform. Adobe announced about a year ago, not communicated very, very well, that they are going to be abandoning several of the platforms that they've been supporting. And so if you're on an Adobe-based CMS, you may want to talk to your design firm about finding a way to migrate that to a WordPress or another CMS.
Absolutely.
If we can figure out the exact name of the platform, we'll tell you. But if you're using Adobe, your should be perking up. That might be something you might want to look into, because there's a lot of those that are going to be going dark come December 31, or maybe even a little bit earlier. Rachel asks, so Matthew, do you have any tools out there that you can use, or you can help, you can recommend to help us determine who our audience I can't speak today. Wow. Tools you can use that we can use to help us determine who our target audience is. And how do we go about identifying audiences that we might be missing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as like tools go for information gathering, surveys are probably one of the most effective ways of doing that, right? You kind of need to know, first off, who those people are, obviously, but as far as gathering the information, surveys are great for, getting what you want, because you have full control over the information that you need to gather. So, from a purely software standpoint, we talked about SurveyMonkey is great for that. Google Forms is great for that, to make a form and disseminate it, distribute it to any stakeholders in your circle. Take a look at your marketing comms department. See who, if you have an email list, you can target those people. There's several ways of kind of getting that information of who the target audience is. But as far as getting the information you need, we talked about some of that, earlier on about, meet your audience where they are. Social media is a great place, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, if you're on those, throw a link up there, just let people know that, hey, we're thinking about approaching a website redesign. We'd like to get some information, just make it like a mass, just kind of blast it out and see who responds. Would you be, ask online through social media, whatever, would you be open to, a 10-minute conversation, or take 5 minutes to go through the survey of 5 to 10 questions, and then send it to them directly. That's a great way to go about it. You want to kind of do a little bit of crowdsourcing if you don't have the information from a newsletter list or any sort of luxuries of a database or anything that you're keeping of anyone who's engaged with you before. Use social media is a good place to send that out.
And with that, I think we're going to need to leave it there. We're about 20 minutes past the hour. Matthew, you've been incredibly generous with us over the last 80 minutes. So thanks to you and the whole team over there at Visceral for making the time. For folks who still have questions we didn't get to, doesn't mean you're not going to get your questions answered. Just means we're not going to do it over the internet, or at least publicly. Matthew's email address is on the screen there. You can see their Twitter handle, and you can always tweet at the network, at the Com Network, or the hashtag ComNetLive, ComNetLive, and I promise we will reshare it or put it in front of Matt, the team over there. So with that, thanks very much, everybody, and we'll be back fairly soon. Stacy, what do we got next?
We have Nico Rosenstone.
Oh yeah, this is awesome. So if you're still with us, Calvo Rosenstone from the Haas Junior Fund, who led a fantastic conversation, a comment down in Austin about trans inclusion, and wrote a wonderful piece in Stanford Social Innovation Review on the same subject, is going to be joining us in just a couple weeks' time. We'll be getting an invitation out to you all soon, but a wonderful way for us all to learn a little bit more about how to do a better job of being as inclusive and open and welcoming with our work and our words as we possibly can be. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, Matt and Jay and the whole team at Visceral, thanks so much for making the time and all the work you put in to prep for this. Really grateful. And to all of you, be well, go Nats. Unless you're an Astros fan, still go Nats, and we'll see you all very, very soon. Be well, everybody. See you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.